Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Slate's Veep Rapid Response Team. We are here to talk about last night's debate and, just get into the particulars, talk about Harris and how she pretty much dominated a flailing Mike Pence. And so I'm Julia Craven, and with me I have my wonderful colleagues, Ben Mathis Lilley and Christina Cauterucci. So how are y'all doing today?
Great.
Tired.
Great. Yeah.
So excited to be here. I'm pumped to hear what you guys thought of the debate. I read your wrap-up chat, which I really appreciated.
I think we had some of the same conclusions as you did in your wrap-up post.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. We should just get right into that. Christina, what did you think of the debate? Because me and Ben have just gone through this together already. So I'm sure we're interested to hear what you have to say about it.
So before the debate, the day before, I went back and watched a couple of videos of the 2016 debate to remind myself of what Mike Pence was like at a debate, because I think for the past 3 years, he's really been a background figure at the White House because Trump just hogs all the energy and attention. He sucks all the air out of the room. And Mike Pence is far more subdued, a much more traditional politician. He doesn't care as much about like the sick burns and insults and trolling the libs. He's very driven by a deeply held ideology. And it is pretty much business as usual for like a certain brand of far-right Republican. So in my mind, I feel like I thought of him as just a very wooden, not a formidable debate opponent. But watching him debate Tim Kaine in 2016, I was reminded that his woodenness is actually an asset when you're trying to defend something that Donald Trump has done, because Mike Pence is very skilled at, like smoothing a layer of peanut butter over everything he says. Like, he's just so smooth and unruffleable. And just, it sounds like he's reading off a press release all the time, but in a very like calming voice. And that's what you want when you're trying to defend really terrible, chaotic things. He did exactly that last night. And I was worried for Kamala Harris because I knew that she was facing a much different set of expectations than Tim Kaine was, especially as a Black woman. She wouldn't be able to come at Mike Pence in the same sort of combative way that Joe Biden went at Donald Trump. But I thought she did really well. I mean, I'm biased, obviously, because I like her a lot more than I like Mike Pence. But the fact that she treated him like, just sort of an absurd clown, scoffing at him when necessary, but also staying focused on Trump's record and also what she and Joe Biden want to do. I thought she struck a great balance between those two things. Whereas Mike Pence, you expect somebody coming off of almost 4 years of, running a presidential administration to have something to show for it. And like in the 90 minutes of debate, it became really clear that he didn't.
What about you, Ben? Do you have any different feels about it now that you've slept on it?
No, I think that sums up how I felt about Harris's performance. I think, in regards to Pence, a comment I saw after the debate, I think hammered this home. It was someone talking about how, Pence didn't present a second-term vision. That's the phrase, a second-term vision to the American public of what the Trump administration wants to do. And that is true. But I had actually not even really noticed that because I had such low expectations. I mean, what vision could he present? I mean, even in contrast to the kind of aggressive, xenophobic platform that Trump ran on in 2016, there just is no content to the campaign. And so as you guys observed as well, not only does he not have any big popular idea to kind of go back to, he is stuck defending all these things like he's just stuck defending an economic crisis and and the administration's handling of the pandemic, and those are just really losing issues for him. Like I noted last night, the first three questions about the coronavirus, I mean, they were devastating for Pence. And they were completely fair questions. They were completely like, Susan Page, the moderator, did a very kind of traditional, even-handed, some people say this, some people say that. But even right now, when you're doing that kind of, taking that kind of approach, it still sounds like you have an axe to grind with the Republican candidate, because they're the incumbents and they have to answer for a lot of stuff. So Harris, I think I was surprised to see some people say that they expected her to be more aggressive. Maybe that's because she does have this reputation among Democrats for really sticking it to people in the Judiciary Committee hearings. And she, of course, probably delivered the most memorable blow against Joe Biden in the primary when she talked about school segregation. But, it seemed to me to kind of fairly obvious that she wasn't going to go in trying to do that for the reasons that we can get into. Like, even the restrained performance she gave was criticized, of course, by some people as being, too fresh, basically. The smirking, it was rude or whatever. And so I think that she knew that she couldn't just go in and kind of do the prosecutorial grilling. But at the same time, I was impressed because it didn't seem to me like someone trying to restrain themselves or be someone else. And that's the danger in these debates when someone knows that they're not supposed to be aggressive, is that they just have no idea what they are supposed to project. And I thought she was fine. She seemed confident, but she didn't cross over the line into being the story, as they say.
Right. Yeah. And I think that was sort of the best she could have hoped for, with Biden leading by such a wide margin in the polls right now, and with people not historically caring much about the vice presidential nominee. Like, the best she could hope for was not to make some huge error or say something so insane that it would make headlines the next day. As far as, you made a good point, Ben, about, sometimes when people try not to be one thing, they don't know then what they're supposed to be, and they end up coming across really fake and performative. I think because she's a former prosecutor, there's a lot of acting that goes into that.
Yeah.
You're constantly performing and modulating your performance for different judges or different juries or different cases. And I mean, I also think she just loves doing this stuff. Like, every time I watch her in a Senate hearing or in every debate, like, it seems like she's actually having a lot of fun. And even when she took more aggressive stances during the Democratic primary, she would laugh too. Like, one of my favorite moments was when Joe Biden accidentally said that he had gotten the support of the only African-American woman ever elected to the Senate. And she was like, no, I too am an African-American woman elected to the Senate. And she laughed for 20 seconds about it on stage. I just think she takes such joy in being on the right side of things, or what she perceives to be the right side of things, that it just seemed like she had a lot of fun last night. And whereas last week during the presidential debate, I was chewing my fingernails to the nub. Last night, I actually laughed a couple times, which I think Americans would find refreshing, for people who are inclined to be, to support her politically.
Right. Julia, you wrote about her in the primary. How did you see her performance in light of what she'd done in the primary? How did it strike you?
It struck me, so yes to everything that y'all have said, but I think she went into last night as the Senator Harris that we've all come to know, and some of us have come to either love or appreciate or stand or whatever. And so I think she was already going to have an advantage anyway, because this administration it's a dumpster fire. And it's like you said, Ben, there is no second term vision that they can give. What is the vision? That it gets worse? There's nothing positive that they could say about a second term. But I also think that because the first three questions were about the coronavirus and about 210,000 people being dead now, and the president being sick, and Mike Pence just completely bungling the response along with his boss, I think that also really set her up to be in a position where Pence was already flailing. And so she didn't have to be aggressive. She didn't have to come in too hard. All she had to do was just come in with the facts and just reiterate what people are not only seeing on the news, but what they're seeing in their day-to-day lives. Like, most people by this point know someone who has contracted coronavirus, and that skews party lines. It doesn't matter how you politically affiliate yourself. So for him to get up there and not even really acknowledge how, I guess, violent this virus can be on someone's body, I mean, that's not hard for anyone, especially not someone like Kamala Harris, to just be like, hey, like, this guy is playing you. This guy is not taking this seriously. And you've seen it happen. You've seen this happen to your family. You've seen it happen to your friends. So that was a long-winded answer, but that was. I think we're just seeing the senator who we know, the senator who goes viral for stabbing Kavanaugh in the hearings.
You've also been critical of her, and I wonder what you guys think about what I thought were pretty good moments on Mike Pence's part, where he really tried to pin her down on topics that she didn't want to talk about, like her record. I mean, this is a little bit ridiculous because Mike Pence went from saying systemic racism doesn't exist to saying, well, California, disproportionately incarcerates Black men. But, between her record as a prosecutor and the racial implications of that, her support for the Green New Deal, Biden's, slightly different, but not Green New Deal climate plan, and court packing, which she just refused to answer on. I felt like she could have had more moments like that where, he completely dodged the question, which I thought was a very good question. One of the few really good moments that Susan Page, the moderator, had was when she tried to get Mike Pence to say, like, oh, well, if Roe v. Wade is overturned, what do you think should happen? You're pro-life. Tell us what should go down. And he didn't say anything. I felt like that could have been a moment for her to jump in. What did you guys think?
I agree. The court packing, I think she probably went in knowing that she was going to have to do that on court packing. And so that was kind of like a loss that she knew she was going to have to take. I don't know, short of saying, no, we're not going to do it, which I don't think they want to say, because they might do it if as people pointed out, if they pass a Voting Rights Act and the Supreme Court strikes it down, then they might consider it, so I don't think they want to rule it out and then bury themselves in the same hole that a lot of Republicans are in right now, and having to cross themselves up. So I think that she probably knew she was going to have to take that loss. Maybe she could have handled it better, but I don't think it was an easy task. I was going to ask you, Christina, because you've written about the politics of Roe. I thought that was one area where she maybe, if you didn't go in knowing that Amy Coney Barrett is likely to vote to overturn, I'm not sure you came away with a clear sense that that's the likely outcome. And I was wondering what you thought. That was my perspective as someone who's trying to think of what a casual viewer would say. And I agree. I didn't think Harris, quote unquote, prosecuted that point. And like with the Affordable Care Act, she definitely had some talking points she was ready with to say, this is what's going to happen to pre-existing condition protections if this nominee gets on the court. But I didn't see her being that clear on Roe. And I was wondering if maybe there's something I'm missing. Is there a reason they don't want to be too explicit about it? Or was it just it was the end of the debate and it was chaotic and she just didn't get to say what she probably wanted to say?
I think the issue of abortion is just so complicated. So while a strong majority of Americans support Roe v. Wade, support abortion rights, and even a majority of independents and a plurality of Republicans support Roe v. Wade, they differ widely on what exact restrictions they think should or shouldn't be placed on abortion rights. So among Democrats, pretty much unrestricted access to abortion is becoming more popular as people recognize the different difficult situations that people are put in that may force them to have to consider, an abortion later in pregnancy, say. But if you want to, when you bring up issues like that, like the things that people are objecting to about Amy Coney Barrett's record seem like they would be too nitty gritty and hard to explain in a debate format. So, she's written things about the sanctity of an unborn child. But if you come out and say like, well, she thinks the, unborn child is sanctified, like people are going to be like, well, I don't exactly not think that. I can see where even people who support Roe v. Wade might be like, that's a weird thing to criticize. So I think, like any judge who's up for the Supreme Court, she's not going to come out and say, I'm going to overturn this precedent if you put me on the Supreme Court. But I think she could have just hopped on the coattails of Susan Page and said, yeah, Mike Pence, you're pro-life. Don't you want to fully ban abortion, which is a very unpopular political, like a policy. Very few people want abortion to be fully banned. But that's the very likely outcome of Roe v. Wade being overturned. So I think if she could have drilled down on the extreme consequences that, regardless of whether Amy Coney Barrett is seated, the extreme consequences of what Mike Pence wants to happen, or at least get him to, not be able to say that on TV, which might make people worried, that would have been a smart move.
Yeah. I think just to add on to that, though, when you get into the states that they need to win, the states that are toss-ups like North Carolina, right? You can't necessarily go gallivanting through North Carolina talking about or just like ignoring the religious aspects of abortion, right? Like you can't grab these Bible Belt states that way.
Right.
So I kind of sort of forgot what my full point was, but if I remember it, I'll come back to it.
That makes sense. We also saw the issue of fracking come up in reference to some swing states, apparently. I mean, this is one of Pence's clearly strategies coming in, was to say probably the biggest two things he wanted to say are that Kamala Harris and Joe Biden want to raise taxes and that they want to ban fracking. Neither of those, the fracking thing is certainly not true. And in fact, Julia, as I feel like you noted during the debate, like this is something a lot of people in the Democratic Party have a problem with, the platform. Right. A lot of people would like to ban fracking and see it as environmentally destructive and kind of, counterproductive to the ultimate goal of having a green economy. Right. And Biden has said over and over he doesn't want to raise taxes on anyone making less than $400,000 a year, which that is a perfectly popular position. But you can see where Pence was coming from, at least. He kind of wanted to make it look like Kamala Harris was a member of the squad. I mean, this is their strategy for every Democratic politician. I think this is probably happening in races all over the country. Socialists who want to raise your taxes and ban hamburgers. Like that's their best line of attack right now. He probably thought it would work a little easier on Kamala Harris because she's younger. Joe Biden is like pretty obviously not a far left Democrat.
He's not eligible for squad membership.
Yeah, whereas Harris took some kind of fairly far left positions in the primary, like Medicare for all, which I'm kind of more surprised he didn't use that, which is an actual position that she supported rather than one that she never has. But this is actually why I think we saw fracking come up so much, not because fracking is a hot national issue, as many people pointed out on Twitter, but because in states like Pennsylvania, it's more of a wedge issue. And I looked up, before we went on, the poll, there's a poll from August that says 52% of people in Pennsylvania do want to ban fracking, but 40% say they don't. So, you can both see why they wanted to bring it up as a potential wedge issue, but also, again, it goes back to the weakness of their position. When your argument is that Democrats take a position that's popular, but not too popular, but still popular, but they also didn't really take it. Like, that's just not a clear, and think of Mitt Romney, debating Barack Obama in 2012 and how unpopular the Affordable Care Act was then, like at that point. Like that's an issue that you want to be able to bring up over and over in a debate, not something that's kind of like an even issue in some states, So I just think it spoke to.
Right. And maybe that's why he didn't bring up Medicare for all too, because that's also not a terribly unpopular issue. Right. I also think the way he talked about fracking, if you didn't know necessarily what fracking was, what the issues around it were, and you just heard Mike Pence trying to make you scared that they're going to ban fracking and that's going to, harm America, that might just scare you. I don't know.
Yeah, it was go ahead.
No, I was just saying that's what we see the GOP do. We see them try to scare people when they don't actually have anything substantive to say.
I do think it was a strong point, or Kamala Harris refuted both the fracking accusation and the tax raising accusation with very explicit promises that Joe Biden will not ban fracking and he will not raise taxes on anyone under $400,000. And I felt like she did so confidently and in such a way that it would be very easy to hold them to that promise later, that I believe that would be convincing for people, especially seeing all the dissembling happening on the other side of the stage.
Yeah, it's nice to have those kind of hard lines to draw. It's actually a little easier to say you're not going to ban fracking or you won't raise taxes, than to explain what the Biden economic plan actually is, because it's pretty long, and it's so it actually she might have. So yeah, I mean, we talked, Julie and I talked about this in our chat, but she got to, instead of having to be pressed and say as you could see happening, well, Democrats want to spend all this money. Isn't that bad? Aren't people against big government? She got to just take the tax issue and just turn it and say, we think the economy is healthy when working people are making money. That's a great talking point to be able to deliver. I think a lot of people agree with that. And so I did think she was deft in a way that she may not have been in the primary debates, probably because there's 25 people, in those primary debates. So it's a little tougher to make that little pivot when you don't have as much time. But I did think she was deft at that moment, and some others in kind of flipping the issue back to just a very broad statement of principles that probably appealed to a lot of people.
Yeah.
Right. So now that's actually a good segue, because I wanted to ask you, Christina, about some of the planned burns that Harris had.
Yeah, I think this was one of her strengths, and something that I think a lot of people were looking to her to deliver when Joe Biden chose her for vice president is, these lines that she was able to prepare that struck to the heart of the issue. So her opening line about, this COVID-19 crisis being the greatest failure of any presidential administration in the history of the country, was just such a concise and perfect way to open the debate. I think she was probably cheering when she got the first question. And, the way she came back to what it was like to live through the pandemic, which the Trump administration doesn't want to talk about. She talked about, they wanted to keep you calm by keeping this information from you. She gave a shout out to Bob Woodward, a very popular character in many sectors of Americans of a certain generation. How calm were you when you didn't know where you were going to get your next roll of toilet paper? Is toilet paper the biggest issue, on people's minds right now? No, but it shows that she knows what was actually going on for a lot of people. And that was how people were experiencing the pandemic. And it is really scary when you go to the grocery store and see empty shelves. But the Trump administration...
Very relatable.
I'm yeah, that did feel really dystopian. And especially in March, when we had no idea what was happening next. And I think it brought people back to being in that moment. And then looking to Donald Trump for leadership, I certainly didn't, but I think there were people who felt like, okay, what's the president going to do here? Is he going to lead us through this moment? And then just being presented with, you're on your own. I thought that was incredibly effective. I also think when she's just such a good performer. When she came out and talked about his tax returns and said, let's talk about what being in debt means. That means you owe money to somebody. And that's not something you want your commander-in-chief to do, to owe money to who knows who. I was like, yeah, that boiled it down in a very, very explicit way where, I think a lot of people, if you chose to tune into this debate, you've probably been following the news on a lot of these other topics, but she had a way of making it feel fresh and newly emotional and like a new outrage. And there were other times where she just felt so excited to be able to school Mike Pence on something, like when he said that, America's always had 9 justices on the Supreme Court. And she was like, let's have a history lesson. Abraham Lincoln said this, that, and the other thing about how he wasn't going to put someone on the Supreme Court until the Americans chose their next president. I'm like, it just felt good to see somebody being very prepared. Joe Biden is actually not great in debates. He often fumbles his statistics. He talks over himself. He loses train of thought. Kamala Harris doesn't. And it was very reassuring to watch somebody be able to remember their debate prep and, have answers for things and not be bogged down, as Joe Biden was a little bit by Trump's chaotic demeanor.
Yeah, I remember pointing this out to Ben last night. I was like, the Lincoln line is brilliant because not only is it smart and it's, quick on your feet, and it's like, oh, like you don't even know this like very pertinent piece of information about a man who the Republican Party always turns back to whenever they're accused of being racist. It's like anytime racism comes up, they're just like, this is the party of Lincoln.
Yeah.
Party. Like, what do you mean we can't be racist? This is Lincoln. And then so for her to take their beacon, I guess you could call him, and just be like, you don't even know about this guy's honor and just how he moved and like the typical things that the way in which he led the country, and you actually don't live by that. You actually don't do the same things. I think that was just very, very brilliant, and it left Pence very speechless. He didn't really have anything to say to that. And I won't go in too hard on Lincoln, but because there are other things about him. It's very
That's another live event. We'll do
another day. Yeah, we'll have to do all that. And so now let's talk about the optics, because there were a couple of things that happened last night that were interesting. One, there was all those interruptions, Pence going over time and him not being called out about it as much as Harris was whenever she was trying to get her time back or fight for equitable time. And she spent so much energy trying to fight for the same amount of time that, he used up. But also there was a surprise guest. And I'm not talking about Dustin. So how about we, Christina? How about you start with the interruptions?
I kind of felt like Kamala Harris. First of all, the gender gap between Trump supporters and Biden supporters is the widest, I think, in recorded history in a presidential election. Women are supporting Biden by 20 points more, or in some polls, than men. So Kamala knows that she's speaking to women. I honestly feel like that's a big part of the VP debate, is not to speak to swing voters, but to speak to get your own supporters excited. And I think she was honestly trying for a few moments like that, where it kind of felt like she could have just kept talking when Mike Pence interrupted her. Like sometimes he wasn't saying it too loudly, and it didn't even seem like he necessarily wanted to talk at some points, just sort of registering his disapproval. And then she'd be like, Mr. Vice President, I'm speaking now, let me speak. And then I would go on Twitter and see like all these women being like, every woman who's ever been in a meeting knows what this is like. Like, I think she was, I agree that Pence was out of line and that Susan Page did a terrible job enforcing the rules, but I also think she used it to her advantage by making moments out of it, which she is, well-versed in the viral moment. That's how she's gained a lot of fans from her performances in Senate hearings. And she knows that people, women especially, love to see women stand up for themselves, especially to somebody like Mike Pence, whose gender politics are so regressive that, he couldn't be alone in a room with either of those two women. Ben, how did you feel?
No, I think that, I appreciated that. And I like that she took that risk. And going back to the primary again, I thought one of her problems was she kind of would draw herself back. Like she would go up to the edge of saying she supported Medicare for all, and then she kind of draw herself back. she with the school, busing, segregation, remediation of segregation. She made that kind of big point on Biden, and then was kind of like, well, but that's not what I would do. I wouldn't reinstate this program anyway. And so I liked to see, from a perspective of someone who writes about politics, and just seeing her like be herself. I like that she was a little bit like sassy in those moments, and was like, I think that you hit it on the head. Like Pence didn't necessarily know he was walking into those things,
Yeah.
Like she clearly came in and wanted to project it. Like she was like confident was going to tell him to stop, if he interrupted her. And that, of course, could be seen as a risky move in American politics. We've, of course, seen how the gender gap expressed itself against Hillary Clinton. And so I like that she did that, not just, because I think it was, it's nice to see someone be themselves, but, for her role going forward in the Biden administration. I'm glad that she didn't just go out there and try to be the polite person. Her goal overall was to not make any big mistakes and not make any big moments, but she didn't let that like suppress her just personality. And I like that. And I thought that was like a risk. I thought when she did that, I thought, oh, okay, like she's going for this. And I think it was fine. And I think as you point out, we are conditioned to talk about these things in terms of the risks of alienating male voters, but there is a very big upside for the Biden ticket in impressing and inspiring women. So there's something to be gained there as well. I think you're smart to point that out.
It just those moments reminded me of any time I have accidentally started to speak at the same time that an elder started to speak. And they're just like, excuse me, baby, I'm still talking. Like, I am so sorry. I did not mean for that to happen, which was Pence's reaction, of course. But I got those vibes from it. And it's like you said, Ben, like both of you said, it just felt very genuine. It felt like if you were in a closed door meeting with her, or if you were, again, at dinner and you exit and she was talking and you were trying to jump in, she would just be like, I'm sorry, baby. Like, I'm still talking. Like, I'm like, and then everyone would just stop talking.
Yeah. And I think that was part of how she was showing authority, which, women have a much higher bar to clear to prove that they are authoritative, are trustworthy. People are a lot more suspect of women in power, especially women who want power and are trying to achieve power. Right. They trust women on national security less, which Pence tried to exploit. And she had very good responses to that too. She's like, I will not be lectured by somebody on enforcing the laws, because I've been a prosecutor. Like, I just felt like she did a good job of projecting that she wasn't going to be somebody who was trampled over, that if she was in the Biden administration and he, who's going to be pushing duty if and when he takes office, would be actually ready to step into the top role. But how about that fly?
The fly. Oof. Go ahead, Ben.
Sorry, Ben, did you have something of substance to say?
I had absolutely nothing of substance to say about the fly. It was kind of like the whole debate was like some sort of exercise to get you to feel sorry for Mike Pence, which is something that I think on principle that I refuse to do. And I think that the rest of us refuse to do as well. But like from the start of the debate being those just brutal questions about the administration's record, to the end of like just becoming this kind of national joke, I think through no fault of his own. I don't know, unless it was related to the pink eye and the fly was, drawn to the COVID. It was a high degree of difficulty for him. And I think, under those circumstances, like the Trump campaign should be happy with him, which again, I don't think is necessarily a great thing for the United States as a whole. But it was one of many obstacles he had, let's put it that way.
Yeah, I do wonder if Trump is now going to fire Mike Pence because having a fly land on you shows weakness. Just putting my prediction out there if it happens.
I think it could happen. I'm not sure if Trump knows Mike Pence is I'm not sure how much Trump registers Mike Pence's existence right now. I feel like there are like a lot of other things going through his mind, not all of them political, some of them existential. Like he's definitely on a journey right now. And honestly, I don't know how much anyone else, let alone Mike Pence, really factors into that.
I think you pointed out that the fact that Mike Pence wasn't considered a close contact of Donald Trump's for the purposes of COVID quarantine was actually a huge insult probably to him.
That was, Jim Newell, I believe.
Oh yeah, credit to Jim.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I saw it and I was just like, wow, so Pence has just been at home.
Yeah.
Right.
Like he was just like, I don't know what y'all are doing, but I'm at home. That actually leads me into a question that I had for the two of you about just the freedom of being vice president, because it seems like Kamala Harris really just seized onto that. She took, this was an opportunity for her to be herself and present herself and introduce herself on a larger stage, while upholding the Biden platform, but also just being like, hey, this is who I am. This is how I, do things. Whereas Mike Pence didn't even seem like a flack of the Trump administration. He just didn't seem like anything. And so I started thinking about the freedom that kind of comes along with being the vice president as far as personality goes, because we even saw that when Biden was VP too, like he was Uncle Joe, whereas Obama didn't get the chance to be Uncle Barack, like he had to be president. So I would love to hear how y'all feel about that as we wrap up.
Yeah, I was going to bring up the number of times that she mentioned her career in law enforcement. Like she clearly did not go into this worrying about hemorrhaging support from the left of the party, of the civil rights the civil rights activists, the progressive wing of the party. And so, I would not be surprised if the Biden-Harris ticket wins, to see that be something that she takes on a big role in the White House. I think she believes that the fact that she is a Black woman, but also was a prosecutor, gives her the perspective to kind of be a middle, an honest broker on these issues. Certainly there are people in the party who don't feel that way, and so I think that I was wondering about that when I was watching it, is like, she's clearly not trying to back away from that part of her past right now. And I wonder if that presages that being kind of one of the major items, in her portfolio, if she is in the administration, because that seemed to be one of the issues that she was most animated about.
I think we talked about this in the conversation we had after she was named the nominee. But I think one of her biggest weaknesses as a presidential candidate was her sort of uneasiness with staking out a middle ground between the left and the center left. And as you said, Ben, she sort of like approached and then backed away from certain statements. She changed her mind about certain things. She never landed on a solid narrative. And I think that's the perfect weakness for a vice president, because you're just basically supporting someone else's platform. So I got the sense when she was running for president that her political worldview, or at least her political goals for herself, were evolving still, and that she didn't know exactly what sort of role she wanted to play in the party or in American politics. This will give her time to figure it out, because, she's basically supporting Joe Biden's platform while hopefully, as some people are hoping, myself included, pushing him a little bit to the left, if possible. And like you said, Julia, I think there's a freedom in not having to be the one out front setting the agenda, but being the one fine-tuning the agenda or taking on parts of the agenda, or just making sure that you're in office to, attempt the agenda.
Yeah, I think that voting rights is another thing that you would see. I mean, she's an attorney.
Yeah.
And so I think that if Biden wins, criminal justice, some sort of criminal justice reform, some sort of policing bill is going to be something that they're going to want to pass through in, I don't know if the first 100 days, but the first year. And absolutely voting rights has got to be, just for the preservation of the party and the society. Yes. And so you could certainly see someone with her background, Attorney General of California, playing a big role in that. And I think that Christina, as you're saying, like that does suit her. Being the one who kind of comes in and knows everything and just has the experience and doesn't necessarily have to be the one stating the vision, but kind of bringing the sides together and getting something passed, like that could be a very useful role for her in the future.
Yeah. So do you guys know who you're going to vote for? Did it sway you?
I got my ballot, but we just moved, and so there's a lot of local races that I need to do my research on. So I'm not ready to send it in yet. I've got to do some more. I think I know at the top of the ticket where I'm going to go.
Cool. Well, this has been great. It was so great talking to you guys again.
Likewise.
It's a little gang we have.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, thank you both so much for talking. This was awesome. And thanks to y'all at home for watching. And as I always tell you, drink water and wear sunscreen. Bye, y'all.